Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. I appreciate it. Good friend. And good to see some of you who I already know, and the rest of you I hope to get to know a little bit this morning. As Michael said, I am not a scientist. I'm a social scientist, but I'm not a physical scientist. I did work on influence, communication, leadership for many, many years, and around significant change. And obviously we're going through a significant change right now, and one that's going to be going on for centuries perhaps. But I want to inspire some hope and some change today. A quick story. Several years ago, when my next to youngest grandchild was 8 years old, he told his mother, my daughter, that he didn't want to have children because he would be too afraid of them the grandchildren coming into this world. And that touched me. Today, fortunately, my next youngest grandchild, who's 4, every time she goes outside and she sees a butterfly, she just lights up and she chases after the butterfly and gets very excited. That's what motivated me to do this kind of work as an activist around climate and the environment, especially on the Cape. Many of you probably know that the Cape is the second most affected place in the world when it comes to sea temperature. And that sea temperature will significantly affect us in many different ways I'll be talking about today. But this is going to be different than you might have heard before. I will give you some basic facts about climate change here on the Cape, but I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about what we can do about it and how we can especially deal with people who are climate deniers or people like ourselves who are very comfortable and really would rather not have to make changes in our lives. So let me get started by sharing my screen. All right. Could someone unmute and just let me know if you can see the blue screen and hear me?
I can see it and hear it.
Great, thank you very much. All right. So the title here is Transformational Climate Leadership on Cape Cod. Transformational leadership is a field that's been around for about 60 years around how to do something other than get the job done. It focuses on how to lead people in transforming an organization or a culture. If you hear birds, it's not in your mind. That's purposely there to, in the background, give you a sense of where we are on this heavenly place of Cape Cod. I'm going to be talking about how the Cape has been changing, what we're trying to save, the key elements of eco-just solutions, what eco-justice is, why people deny the climate emergency and resist taking the needed action. And a hint, it's not about facts. How to constructively and collaboratively develop and implement solutions and community strategies to leverage and build local resilience. So how has the Cape been changing? Originally, the people of the First Light, the Wampanoags, lived in harmony with the land, water, and sky. This, as many of you may know, was and it, for some people still is, a kind of structure that they lived in to be close to Earth. And with European settlers, a reliance grew on whaling, agriculture, fishing, and trade. From the 1920s to the 50s, Falmouth was the strawberry capital of the East, with one of the largest farms east of the Mississippi. In 1915, Falmouth was home to the largest hygienic mushroom plant in the country. Wow. Starting in the early 20th century, tourism started to grow as a major industry on the Cape, as it also became a major retirement destination and biological, environmental, scientific research and education center, as all of you know. Retirees now represent about 25% of all full-time residents on the Cape across the Cape. In some towns, it's much higher than that. Tourism and supporting retirees is becoming unsustainable. As many of you know, we're lacking a lot of things to make it work. And for the future, it will be very difficult, as it is already starting to be. We have overdevelopment. You can see many of the places around where you live. If you live outside of Woods Hole, even in Woods Hole, there are homes being developed everywhere, trees being taken down, rising costs for food, for transportation, for just about everything, an over-reliance on fossil fuels, severe storm and erosion, lack of affordable housing, public transportation, inadequate local healthcare, a declining service workforce, and food and water insecurity. This is not the place where I'm giving you hope, it's where I'm giving you reality. This is very familiar to you, where most of the tourists and the retirees go back and forth. Our coastline and beaches are eroding, and the environment is degrading as a result of how we live and the resulting climate change. The results: rising sea levels, sea temperature and salinity, plastic pollution in the oceans, nitrogen in the ocean, destructive storms, sea surge, flooding, damaging winds, rising summer temperatures with associated feedback loops and tipping points. I'm assuming many of you know what feedback loops are and tipping points. Feedback loops is when the thing that happens, it causes it to get worse, which causes it to get worse. An example of the temperature in the sea causes the atmosphere to get warmer, causes the temperature in the sea to get warmer, reduction in the tropical rainforest causes temperatures to go up even further because there's less water going up so that it protects the atmosphere less. And tipping points are those places that we get to where you can't come back. It's getting over the hill, over the bump of the effects of climate change. The estuaries and reservoir, this is our reservoir in Falmouth at Long Pond, have rising levels of phosphorus and potassium, PFAS chemicals, excess nutrients, arsenic, and pesticides. I'm sure you've seen 5 of the beaches on the Cape in the last week alone have had very high levels of biological pollution, and they've been closed. Most of them are back open again. PFAS chemicals are causing difficulties in our basic water system, ability to have healthy drinking water, increased rates of cancer. Pesticides are causing not only the good things from the things we want to kill, like our grasses to be good, but our grasses and our lawns are causing just about everything else to go. So there's significant difficulty. Over the last 5 years, we've had offshore wind farm development begin a shift from fossil fuel to renewable energy. You'll see where not only are we doing wind farms, there's more solar power, there's more, many new forms, hydro, we're getting into geothermal systems, heat pumps. Some of you probably know that if you're interested in doing a heat pump to shift over from fossil fuels in your home, you can get a $10,000 rebate and a 0% bank loan for the next 7 years. We have a disappearing fish in the industry. We're called Cape Cod, but the cod are nearly to be found. The COVID-19 pandemic changed all our lives. Increased reliance on a seasonal migrating migrant workforce. Increased ownership of second homes. More than 50% of the homes on the Cape now are second homes, some are third homes. Ballooning real estate values and cost of living. And remote working, meaning that anyone can live here and work anywhere. So much change. The climate and social emergencies require, as part of the global climate response, as a community, as individuals, nationally, internationally, that we take immediate action and affect permanent change. It's not just doing something, it's affecting change. We can't sustain ourselves locally, nationally, globally, if we continue to live the way we've been living. We need to adapt to and mitigate the climate crisis and an interdependent change of the whole ecosystem. And by eco, we don't just mean the environment. We're talking about the whole system, every part of what we live and where we live. If you've never been inside a wind turbine, this is one that I got to visit recently. The outside, obviously the 2 out of 3 in Falmouth aren't working and are going to be taken down. But in many places, wind turbines are becoming both onshore and offshore future significant part of our power structure. We need to look at it from a wider perspective. So I, for my wife's 75th birthday, took her up in a plane, and we took a view of what locally we look like from afar. This is overlooking Buzzards Bay. It's a little deceiving that it looks like everything are trees, but we are now 87% developed without trees. Most of our trees have been taken down. That's 28. So what are we trying to save? I'm sure many of you already know this information, but just in case you're missing the details, 339 square miles of this 12,000-year-old glacier-formed peninsula called Cape Cod. Upland, wetland, and coastal ecosystems. This is in Eastham at Fort Hill. 15 Cape towns with 50 villages. You see the names here, but in case you need a little reminding, from Bourne and Sandwich and Falmouth and Mashpee on the Upper Cape to Eastham, Wellfleet, Truro, and Provincetown on the lower. 560 miles of coastline with 130 beaches. This is in Truro. Square miles of Cape Cod Bay, 430 square miles of Buzzards Bay. (17.4 square miles of 500 feet wide Cape Cod Canal, the widest sea level canal in the world. You see the train bridge, boats coming by, and the nature of the ducks that are still here. There are 100 ponds and lakes covering 11,000 acres. By the way, you don't need to take notes. You'll be given, if you want it, anyone can have a copy of the PDF of all the information. Over 200,000 people year-round and 500,000 in the summer. This is the Barnstable County Fair. An increased loss of amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and vertebrates. Over 470 interdependent species. An ever-decreasing number of trees due to development, invasives, disease, and climate change. Native white pines, American holly, scrub pine, scrub oak, red cedar, and non-native white oak, elm, scotch, pine, aspen, and willow. Those are the most common species we have. A place of justice is a hallowed place. We'll be talking a little bit about the justice and the injustice of the climate emergency and what's going on in the world. What is eco-justice? An integrated approach to solving societal and natural problems with long-term solutions that do not disproportionately negatively affect environmental justice populations. So the key components here are, it's integrated, it is both natural and societal, it is long-term solutions, and last is the justice portion, that it doesn't disproportionately negatively affect the marginalized groups, often who don't have the power to deal with it. An EJ population is a definition of the states of Massachusetts Commonwealth. Neighborhoods with a median household income of less than 65% of the median household income in Mass, which is of 65% of 86,725 is 56,371. So any household with less income than that, 56,000, is an EJ population. And 25% more minority population, foreign-born or lacking of English language proficiency. Those are the EJ populations. And yes, we have a lot of them here on the Cape. They are marginalized. There are EJ populations in 11 of the 15 Cape Cod towns due to poverty, people of color, English language lack of proficiency, including all the towns you see here, with the exception of Chatham, Orleans, Truro, and Wellfleet. That's this year. The intersectional solution of eco-justice, EJ, includes integrated systemic change of the ecosystem of which climate is a part. So it's not separate. It includes climate and everything else, which includes adaptation, mitigation, and transformation. So usually they just refer to either adaptation or mitigation, but it suggests that you're either going to adapt, meaning you're simply going to make minor changes, or you're going to mitigate, meaning minimize the negative effects. But it's also transformation, literally changing the basic structure of how we live, or it won't be there perhaps. You can be a climate emergency first responder if you choose to, or you can wait until you must, or your children or grandchildren must. Full frame solutions are those that include all of the different components of our system. EJ addresses emergencies and projected problems and opportunities in the climate, environment, population, biodiversity, agriculture, social, political, racial, legal, economic, immigration, healthcare, food, and water. So you might think that that's a little bit much, but the issue is when any of us try to make any changes around the climate or the environment without taking all the others into effect, they're interdependent. If you don't change all of them in some way, you will be negating the possibility of changing the climate issue and the environmental issue, the degradation. Why do people deny climate emergency and resist taking the needed action? Why do any of us not switch from fossil fuels? Why do we not drive less? It's not due to a lack of information. This is relatively new research. Most people assume that people don't get it. They don't accept it. It's because they're illogical, they're not smart, whatever. It's political. No. The primary contributing factors are emotional. And I need to switch something here because I'm having trouble reading it. A concern over overwhelming, continually confused, powerlessness, anger, fear. It's the emotion. It causes us unconsciously to deny the need or to be too afraid to get beyond it. This was in a demonstration just last year on the Falmouth Green. If you think your mask makes it hard to breathe, imagine being Black in America. Why people deny climate emergency and resist taking the needed, a deep-seated resistance to facts, needed change, are ideologically, economically, or socially threatening and uncomfortable. They understand it perhaps, but it won't get in. Is it a climate emergency? People are usually unaware of their cognitive dissonance reduction, which is the unconscious resisting of the truth and the needed changes in order to reduce their discomfort and their conflict with facts and attitudes that are dissonant with who they are, their personal and cultural based beliefs, identity, and behavior. How to constructively collaborate and address the eco-just solutions, if that's what we're dealing with, we need to have supportive climate discussions together, not just one-on-one, in families, in communities like this one that you're part of, in the Woods Hole community, in a religious community that you're part of, in a political party that you're part of. You need to be first responders as leaders in a turbulent time. Or you can hold back, but the question is, who is better than you with the wisdom, the intelligence, the connections, the perception and respect of you that maybe you can have an impact. You don't need to be in charge, but you can have constructive communication and simply be aware and validate if there's something we should be working on together. How to have those supported climate discussions? It's basic active listening. The first thing is, don't try to convince anyone. Start by asking for stories, their thoughts, their passions. What do they care about? Their kids, their homes, their financial security, future, their histories, their strengths, their feelings, and listen with an open mind. Reflect back what you hear. Encourage empathy and compassion. Don't try to argue. Don't try to convince. Build on their ideas. Add to them. Focus on innovation, how things could be done differently. Help, partner, offer, collaboration. Share your strengths. Your strengths may be your time, your talents, your treasures. Offer your leadership, learning, patience, encouragement. So in these turbulent times, how do you lead? The research is very clear. You lead differently in times like this when so much is up in the air. You need to be the strange attractor. For those of you who are familiar with chaos theory, whether you agree with it or not, the research around it, when it applies to leadership, is clear. People are looking for patterns. They're looking for some stability, some way to make sense of what's going on. And you can be the strange attractor to predict and share the patterns of the chaotic system. Talk about where could this go? What does make sense here? Be values driven. Talk about what you care about. Be visionary. Think about where this could go, what could happen. Provide a mission. What are we trying to accomplish here? Provide a plan based on the future. Don't try to make changes for today, but where we could be 3 to 5 or 10 years from now. Maintain trust, maintain some predictability. People are in continuous stress. The American Psychiatric Association has a new diagnosis over the last 3 years. Instead of just PTSD, it's continuous stress disorder. Most of us, the majority of our population, is in continuous stress of some kind. They need some predictability. They need optimization of their stress. They need to we recognize it's there, it will be there, but we can handle it through continuous learning, teamwork, and empowerment. Give people roles. Give yourself a role. Have some expectations. What is doable? What can we do? Give people feedback. Nice job. Boy, I'm really amazed that you could do that. Boy, I wish I could do that. Do you have any suggestions? Have influence. Remove barriers. The biggest problem with the problems of today is that the barriers of politics, of money, of international differences, of cultural differences are getting in the way. How can we minimize those? Inform people what the audience needs, not what you need to tell them. Provide a targeted message to what those people care about in the language that they can listen to, with images, stories. Evoke the needed response. When you ask, how can I talk to people? Don't start it by asking, what do I want to present and what's the best way to organize it? Ask, what am I trying to accomplish here? And how can I evoke the needed response? Consider culturally based framing. Framing of what needs to be said, what needs to be talked about around the culture of the person or people or group that you're talking with. And remember, it often takes 7 times of repeating the conversation before the goal is accomplished. So collaboration is the word. Synergy, alignment, integration, positivity. Transform, maintain, empower, inform, collaborate. How to communicate? Use culturally based anecdotes, images, and people's personal experiences. This is based on research in the last few years. This is what works. Don't focus on the impact of carbon emissions. People resist that. If you're trying to come up with an argument that we're trying to reduce carbon, they don't buy it. Come up with something else that's tied into what they care about, what they get. Acknowledge that the most climate emotions, most of them, but not fear, okay? If you talk about fear, people get defensive and it gets exacerbated. Talk about other things like hope. Talk about anger, but not fear. Affirm the climate science by highlighting only what is the overarching clear scientific consensus. Don't talk about the stuff that is arguable. And focus on policies as opposed to individual climate action. What can we do together? How can we change the ability to make a difference? At the beginning, I talked about inspiring hope and action. That's what I have found over the last 5 years of trying to be an environmental and climate activist. Seems to make the biggest difference. Ask, what hope do people need? What action can I take to help them get it? Fake news is a big issue. What we have found is that you need to inoculate the fake news ahead of time by giving the explicit warnings of the impending disinformation ahead of time, by pre-refuting them. Don't wait for it to come out. Talk about it in advance. Youth are the people that we're going to have to rely on. They are the ones who are going to take this from us in the next 20 years, if not very much sooner. They need to be pre-educated now to increase their future trust in climate science and climate scientists. Our adults need to be educated now so they can be curious about climate science. Most of them don't know it, but they need a curiosity to ask. Stewardship, use Earth stewardship as the foundation on which to build your influence. Talk about stewardship. What is our role as stewards of the Earth? And eco-justice can be the foundation of the climate response. Fairness, intersectionality, and protecting all life forms. This is a youth group. I've worked with the Audubon, Cape Cod Audubon Society's Climate Youth Leadership Program. They do wonderful work and they really have great ideas. And what they want to do is they want to be respected and listened to and asked. Community strategies to leverage and support local resilience. Tap into community strengths. Don't try to come up with something brand new. Ask, what is our community good at? What do we know? Who's here? Attend to diverse needs. Don't assume everyone has to agree. Ask, what do we have here and what do those different groups need? We need a complex solution to a complex problem with a diverse society. Here's some diversity for you. I'm sure this is familiar to many of you.
Here's
We need it to integrate into existing community efforts. So rather than ask, what can I start? Ask what's already going on that I can integrate into. What can I make sure that that climate and eco-justice has a say through the network of networks, through all the different groups. And there are so many groups. There are over 100 different groups working on this already. Here's just a sample of many of them. Cape Light Compact, Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, Cape Youth Climate Action Network. I mean, you can look at these lists. They're just overwhelming. And every one of these groups is doing an amazing amount of work. If you want to get involved, ask, what do I care about most? Get to know some of these groups and you can really, you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's fantastic work going on. It will give you hope. There are more. There are more. And that's just a sample. Celebrate the past and ask elders what worked previously. Elders do not want to be, ask yourself, do you want to be forgotten? Do you want to assume that because you're older, you don't get it? Because you're not to be respected? No, we want to be asked. We want to be asked to be involved. What do we think? And asked, what is our history? Look forward and ask the youth what could work in the future. They know technology, they know social media, they know their generation, they know they have very out-of-the-box ideas, and they can really work. Emphasize community interest, common interest, potential contribution, benefits, instead of differences in probability and problems. Everyone needs to be perceived that they are winning. You can't have winners and losers here. Involve community opinion leaders and people who cross boundaries. What you can do best, there are many people who are involved, as many of you are, many different groups. And when they can leverage the efforts in different places at the same time, it works better. Learn and share best practices from similar communities. One of the best groups that I pay attention to is the Island Climate Action Network on Martha's Vineyard. They have a great newsletter. They really keep you up to speed on what's going on the Cape and Islands. They do wonderful efforts. They're usually the first to introduce new things. Integrate positive effects of taking climate action with other positive impacts for the community. Here's an example. The Cape Cod Commission spent 2 years getting people from throughout the community across the Cape involved with data collection to put together an integrated solution. You can see measuring performance, implementing actions, student client ambassadors, communication, implementation, Cape-wide, emissions, legal jurisdictional, stakeholder mitigation, transportation, homes, businesses. Focus more on what people can do and how they feel, and less on what people need to believe. It's hard as a scientist, as a social scientist, to not try to prove something, to not try to convince people by giving them the data and the facts. It doesn't work. Use stories and narratives, visual imagery, appeal to people's histories, values, and emotional needs. That's what I've been trying to do today. Why do I care? This is my next to youngest granddaughter a couple years ago. I love this place, and I want her and the rest of my 6 grandchildren, 6 others, to have this place and be able to share in the beauty and the future. Why do you care? Here's my email, my phone number. I'd be happy to talk with any of you, and we'll open it now for questions and discussion.
Thanks very much, Lou. That was great and inspiring and instructive all at the same time. If you have a comment or a question, please unmute yourself and jump right in.
Jack, would you unmute?
Well, all of what you said, Lou, was, I agree with Michael's comments. It was inspiring and instructive. There is one issue that, one underlying problem, it seems to me, that needs to be mentioned. Obviously, Cape Cod is a minuscule part of the overall worldwide problem with climate change. I think that one major underlying problem is population growth worldwide. I think I've mentioned this before to other people in this group. In my lifetime, the Earth's population has quadrupled from under 2 billion to almost 8 billion. There was about 100 years ago, there was a book published called 100 Million Guinea Pigs. This was about the dangers of unregulated over-the-counter medicines that contain things like radium. That's now controlled, but the title of the book, 100 million, I think that was something like what the US population was at that time. Now it's 3 times that. So I think the Western world is to some extent aware of this problem and maybe does try to limit population, but not very successfully. And certainly in the third world, that doesn't work. I think the human instinct is that when things are tough, the instinct is to reproduce more rather than less. That's a way of preserving the species. But in South Asia and other parts, maybe East Asia, it's dangerous. China had a one-child policy. I haven't heard anything about that recently. I think they've abandoned that. Japan certainly has a declining population, so good for them. But that, it seems to me, is a very large underlying problem that really needs to be addressed before a lot of these other problems climate change and pollution of the ocean and so forth will follow. I don't know exactly how that can be done, but I certainly think it's a good idea for people on Cape Cod to be a model of what could be done. And I think that's probably the main value of what you presented, Lou. So hopefully we can do that, and hopefully word of that will spread and will affect other people. I hope so. But it seems to me population growth is not talked about, and it seems to me it should be. It is a major part of the problem.
Thank you, Jack. And I must reinforce that it is talked about by many, many people. And there are many, many groups, as you see the 100 or so groups just on the Cape that are dealing with climate change. There are just as many, if not more, groups dealing with overpopulation in the world. I can't affect that. I'm not an expert in it. So you have to take something you can make a difference on. I can't affect global change. I'm not an expert. I'm not. The people at Woodwell Climate Research Center are experts on global climate change, and that's what they're trying to provide data about. I think, they often say, think globally, act locally. You need to pick a piece of it and try to make a difference there. Certainly
Yes.
by voting for people who believe in birth control and controlling procreation, and political policies that do something about that is one way to do it. Everyone has to pick their space. Arthur?
Just to add some data, the population, according to the 1930 census, was 130 million. It is now 340 million.
In the United States.
Yes, the United States.
Lou, I wanted to ask you about the 3 slides worth of organizations that you list.
Mhm.
It seems to me that we would do better with fewer organizations so that people could have more of an impact. I worry about all those organizations, and I wonder if there isn't a way to coalesce those organizations, or at least have a kind of umbrella organization that deals with specific issues.
Really good point, Michael. There are several organizations that are trying to do that. In many cases, you can't stop the many, because every town wants to have their own climate action network. And every town wants to have their own conservation commission or conservation preservation. So many of those organizations are town and local. There are several organizations that are specifically focused on developing the network and the collaboration between the organizations, including the Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod, a great organization to work with, the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative, which specifically has as its goal to support and provide ties between the different organizations. 350, there's the Audubon, there's Sierra Club. Many of them are working to work with other organizations. In Falmouth alone, there are probably 15 or 20 different organizations. But what's happening is that they are staying in touch with one another, and they are collaborating. It's one more problem. Should we spend the next 5 years trying to get people to stop forming organizations, or should we try to get them to work together? And that's my objective, is to try to get people to work together and stay in touch with one another through those other organizations. That's why I joined as an alternate to the board of directors of the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative. That's why I collaborated with the Association of Preservation of Cape Cod for the program to plant 1,500 trees across the Cape. You need to find organizations that are well networked. That's what I'm finding.
So I wonder if you could either now or afterwards give us some advice if we wanted a particular organization. Most of us live in the Falmouth area, although not necessarily. If you could email me a list of your highest priority organizations, I can send it out to everybody else, because I think you've inspired us to do something. But the next question is to do what? Right.
And, if you're interested to go to the YouTube channel on eco-justice and the climate emergency that I started. it really depends. One of them is about you, and you're deciding what you have to offer and what you have passion about. So for example, if you're a faith-based person, there's the Faith Communities Environmental Network. And we focus in that group around the morality, the faith, the hope, the inspiration, the interfaith groups coming together. There are currently 38 different faith groups on the Cape that are collaborating together to address issues of getting to those people who have faith and are part of faith organizations, faith communities. If you want to work on climate change very specifically, contact the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative. What I do is I have a pay it forward initiative so that all of my pro bono consulting, when those people ask, can they pay me? I say, please make a donation to the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative. And they've received thousands of dollars from those efforts. And again, I'll send you this, Michael, but the Association to Preserve Cape Cod is another. If you want specifically in Falmouth, I really would encourage you to support the FALCAN, the Falmouth Climate Action Network, that is working specifically around getting policies and the laws and the guidelines for Falmouth to follow up on the declaration of climate emergency that Falmouth had 2 years ago, because we need to change the policies and the funding to support that emergency.
That's great. So if you will send me your annotated list of target organizations, I will send it out to the people that are on this email list.
You bet.
Thanks.
Other comments and questions, discussion? Yes, Jack?
Yeah.
Unmute.
So one question, this has always mystified me. There are a great many companies that sell fossil fuels, make a lot of money out of that. It's supposedly a good place to invest money. What I wonder is, why aren't these companies jumping on the renewable energy programs? There's money to be made there also, and in the long run, obviously, that's where the future is. And I would think that those companies, with the clout that they have and the advertising resources that they can mobilize, could do a very good job of advertising and spreading the use of renewable energy. And it might even be in their interest to invest money into doing research in tidal energy, for example.
Almost all of them are, Jack. For example, Exxon is significantly supporting the offshore wind industry off of the Cape and Islands. Many of those organizations have a double strategy. One is to make as much money possible until the transition away from fossil fuels. And the other is to start investing in research and development for renewable energy sources and the grid to be changed. So that is happening. And for example, I've divested all of my retirement savings away from any energy company that is not primarily focusing on renewable energy. One of the 8 seminars that I co-led this year with having the renewable energy and eco-just investment people from Cape Cod 5. Cape Cod 5, by the way, is one organization, one bank that is really focused on investment that is a renewable energy and one that is focusing on justice. And you can look at that whole hour and a half webinar, and it talks about how to invest if you care about the future and shift your portfolio away from those things that are damaging the earth and damaging our politics.
No, it's reassuring to hear that there are some companies that are doing this now. Why aren't all the energy companies doing this? I think there needs to be some pressures applied, or there might be political mechanisms for pressuring them to get involved in this. It seems to me that would have a very important payoff in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we need to do is we need to change policies, because right now, many of the energy companies are getting money from the federal government to support their work, and they're not sharing of their wealth. What they care about is their investors, and their investors care much less, because they're investing them, of making money from non-renewable fossil fuels than they do about the future. So if you care about this, I really encourage you to get in touch with your representatives and tell them that this matters to you, and get on the list. There are things that get put together almost every day, letters to go out to our representatives, and you can get on lists for those. From the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative, they have a newsletter that goes out every month, and as an example, on a daily basis, I get their newsletter, and the newsletter tells me to sign this one, sign that one, send it to your senator, send it to your local representative. There are many of those policies. Without those policies being changed, the fuel companies are going to continue to make the money, because they're primarily committed to their stockholders.
Mhm. Lou,
Yes, Dan.
and another fossil fuel question. There is a movement afoot toward electric cars, and I think, everyone is so optimistic that this is going to take care of our problems, but and here, this is specifically the part of the question, that it's going to get worse before it gets better in terms of how much electricity we need to get these cars on the road right now. And we don't have the capacity to go to renewable. So you have said, don't burst anybody's bubble. Don't say, well, that's part of the problem. You really should drive less and do this and that, or look into hydrogen cars or whatever. But the electricity is really just a conversion of fuel, which one of these days, I hope, will all be taken directly from the sun, instead of going through this prehistoric loop where we are burning. Let's see, Jack Lewin, I think his name was. He was a biologist who wrote this poem about when I'm retired and content to toast my rear on summer suns of yesteryear, and speaking about fossil fuels in particular. How do you do that? How do you get in there and say, but without discouraging people?
Yeah, so you all know Newt. This year, Newt asked me the question, what should I do? And I said, Newt, what do you like? What do you care about? And he said, I have a Tesla. So he said, I got the Tesla 4 years ago when it only cost $35,000. And I said, Newt, do you like electric cars? He loved driving in my electric car.
Uh-huh.
And he said, yeah, I'd love to get one. I said, well, go get it. You can rent one for under $25,000. You can lease one. So he went out and got an electric car that he's leased, and he loves it. Now, your point about that our grid is currently primarily focused on fossil fuel development of energy.
Mhm.
But what's going on at the same time, you can't solve the problem with any one solution. The research has been done by a group called Drawdown that identified 100 solutions that all have to be done to solve this problem, including coal, including changing our grid, including how we drill for energy, including changing our transportation network, including flying, how we take our vacations, including everything under the sun. We need all of them, and we need many different groups focusing on all the different solutions. So right now, we are starting to build up the capacity to use renewable electricity. You can't do one, and you can't wait for the electricity grid to become renewable to have electric vehicles, electric stovetops, electric everything. I don't know how many of you have seen the research, but in the last year, they've identified that using gas stovetops causes 60% increase in methane in your kitchen. within 10 minutes. I have asthma. It was significantly affecting me. So we are going to be switching from our gas stovetop to electric, and we have solar. I put on solar. If you want to put solar on your home right now, you can do it for under $15,000, and you will get it all back within 7 years. Because you can create more as long as you have some exposure to the sun. There are solutions here, and we can make them work. There's no simple solution, but you have to both increase the grid's capacity to have renewable sources, while at the same time, we increase our transportation on the Cape is the biggest source of use of fossil fuels. It is more than 50%, okay? So we need to change our bus network. We need to change our cars. We need to change to electric bicycles, okay? And we need to have a place to charge those things that are renewable. I charge my car based on my solar and on my roof. I pay nothing for it. I make money on my solar, and it costs very little amount to put it in. But we can't just rely on home solar. We need to rely on home solar, on town solar, on the grid solar, and geothermal, and wind, and perhaps nuclear, depending upon how we feel about it. Many different sources of power, okay? Not one of them is going to answer the question. We need many of them. Geothermal for $35,000, if you have a large enough yard, you can put in a geothermal field that for no cost after that whatsoever, based on the 55 degrees under your earth, will completely take care of all air conditioning, all electricity, all heat.
I see.
And at this point, you can get a $15,000 rebate for doing that.
Uh-huh.
And
So,
a 7-year 0% loan. So the opportunities are there. And if you
okay.
Cape Light Compact, you can find out about all those programs and rebates.
Well, so I see now that really brings together this idea of you showed a lot of little circles with different groups, and say if you might have an electric car, but there's probably one part of it that you'd be very interested in, like geothermal or wind or something else. And don't try to solve the whole problem, but be a booster and join with other like-minded people in order to get your point of view. And so, yes, I get it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So I wear clothing that says Cape, Mayflower Wind. I wear hats that talk about that. I go out there and I speak to groups like you, and I go to demonstrations, and I do webinars. Now, you may not want to do everything I do. You simply ask yourself, what do you like doing? What do you have to offer? What do you know about? Do you have money? If it's money you have and you don't have the energy or the resources otherwise, then make significant financial contributions to the organizations that are doing the work. There's lots of things that any one of us can do.
Lou, I think we have to close now. You've actually taken us over our time, and everybody is still on the Zoom, which is a good testament to how inspiring you were.
Yeah.
I take it you will send us links to your PDF file and also to the YouTube, which contains your talk, but also some other talks that you gave. Is that correct?
Yes, the YouTube channel has the 8 webinars that we ran last year.
That's great.
As well as, and I'll give you the list, it'll have the whole list, but I'll also send you a shortened list of resources.
Okay. And
Wonderful.
Inspired by you, I've already written to Cape Cod Climate Change and asked what we can do.
Great. Thank you all so
So-
much for your time. I appreciate
Thank you.
your attention.
Thank you very much.
Lou, before you over and out, you're being the host, you have to go both leave meeting and then leave meeting for all.
I
in
will.
order
And
to-
first, I'm going to stop the recording now.